Abraham, the father of faith. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to trust God? Not when everything is going well, not when the answers are obvious, not when the path ahead is clear, but when God asks you to step into the unknown, when the future seems uncertain, when His promises appear impossible, when all you have is His word. That is the story of Abraham. Abraham's life is one of the greatest demonstrations of faith in the entire Bible. In fact, he is often called the father of faith. 3 major world religions trace their spiritual heritage to him. But even more importantly, every believer can learn powerful lessons from his extraordinary walk with God. Abraham was not perfect. He made mistakes. He experienced fear. He had moments of doubt. Yet through it all, he learned to trust God's promises, and his faith became an example for generations to come. Today, we're going to journey through the remarkable life of Abraham and discover what his story teaches us about trusting God in our own lives. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to Living Word and Scriptures, and share this message with someone who needs encouragement to trust God more deeply. Let's begin. A man living an ordinary life. Our story begins in the city of Ur, one of the great cities of the ancient world. Abraham, originally called Abram, was living an ordinary life. He had family, he had responsibilities, he had plans. There was nothing particularly extraordinary about him from a human perspective. Then one day, God spoke. Genesis 12:1 says, "The Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee." Imagine hearing those words. God was asking Abram to leave everything familiar, his home, his relatives, his security, his comfort, and God wasn't even giving him a detailed map. He simply said, "Go to the land I will show you." Most people want God's complete plan before taking the first step, but faith doesn't work that way. Faith takes the first step before seeing the entire staircase. Imagine standing at the edge of a dense forest at night. You have only a small lantern. The light illuminates just a few feet ahead. You cannot see the destination. You cannot see the entire path, but you can see enough to take the next step. That is how God often leads His people, and Abraham obeyed. Hebrews 11:8 tells us, "By faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. And he went out, not knowing whither he went, not knowing where he was going, not knowing how everything would work out, simply trusting God." That is faith, God's extraordinary promise. After Abraham obeyed, God gave him an incredible promise. Genesis 12:2 says, "And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great." At first glance, this sounds wonderful. There was just one problem. Abraham and his wife Sarah had no children. Years passed, then decades passed, still no child. Imagine being promised a great nation while remaining childless. Imagine celebrating your 70th birthday, then your 80th, then your 90th, still waiting, still believing, still trusting. Many people can trust God for a few days. Some can trust Him for a few months. Abraham trusted God for decades. That is extraordinary faith. During delays, one of the hardest tests of faith is waiting. Most of us don't mind trusting God if the answer comes quickly. But what happens when the answer is delayed? What happens when prayers seem unanswered? What happens when years pass without seeing results? Abraham faced that challenge. God had made a promise, but the fulfillment seemed impossible. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Maybe you've prayed for a loved one. Maybe you've prayed for healing. Maybe you've prayed for direction. Maybe you've prayed for a breakthrough. And yet the answer hasn't arrived. Abraham's story reminds us that God's delay are not God's denials. God works according to His timetable, not ours. What appears impossible to us is never impossible for Him. Looking at the stars one evening, God took Abraham outside. Genesis 15:5 says, "And He brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them, so shall thy seed be." Imagine Abraham standing beneath a vast desert sky. No city lights, no distractions. Millions of stars shining brilliantly overhead. God was saying, "Your descendants will be more numerous than these stars." From a human perspective, the promise seemed absurd. Yet Abraham chose to believe. Genesis 15:6 contains one of the most important verses in the Bible. "And he believed in the Lord, and He counted it to him for righteousness." Abraham believed. Not because the circumstances made sense, not because the evidence supported the promise, but because he trusted the one who made the promise. Faith is not confidence in circumstances. Faith is confidence in God. Abraham's failures. One reason Abraham's story is so encouraging is because he was not perfect. There were moments when fear got the better of him. There were times when he tried to solve problems in his own strength. There were seasons when his faith faltered, and yet God remained faithful. What a powerful lesson. Many people think God can only use perfect people, but the Bible tells a different story. God uses imperfect people who place their trust in Him. Abraham stumbled, but he kept walking. He fell, but he got back up. His faith was not flawless. It was persistent, and that persistence changed history. The birth of Isaac finally, after years of waiting, God's promise came to pass. When Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, Isaac was born. The impossible became possible. The promise became reality. The dream became visible. Can you imagine the joy, the laughter, the tears of gratitude? Everything God had promised was beginning to unfold. This is a reminder that God always keeps His promises, not always on our schedule, not always in our preferred way, but always according to His perfect wisdom. Numbers 23:19 says, "God is not a man that He should lie. When God makes a promise, He has both the power and the faithfulness to fulfill it." The greatest test of faith. Then came the greatest test of Abraham's life. Genesis chapter 22. God asked Abraham to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. At first glance, this request seems impossible to understand. Isaac was the promised son, the child through whom God's covenant would continue. Why would God ask Abraham to surrender him? Imagine Abraham's emotions: confusion, sorrow, questions, heartbreak. Yet Abraham obeyed. Early the next morning, he began the journey. For 3 days he traveled toward Mount Moriah. Every step required faith. Every mile required trust. Every moment demanded obedience. Faith on the mountain, When Abraham reached the mountain, Isaac asked a question. "Father, where is the lamb for the offering?" Abraham responded with remarkable faith, "God will provide himself a lamb." What an incredible statement. Abraham still trusted God even when he couldn't understand God's plan, even when everything seemed contradictory, even when obedience was painful. At the last moment, God intervened. A ram appeared in the thicket. Isaac was spared, and God provided the sacrifice. This event points forward to Jesus Christ. Just as God provided a substitute for Isaac, God would one day provide his own son as the sacrifice for the sins of the world. The mountain where Abraham demonstrated faith became a picture of God's ultimate provision through Christ. Lessons from Abraham's life. What can we learn from Abraham today? First, faith begins with obedience. Abraham moved when God said move. Faith is more than belief. Faith acts. Second, faith trusts God during delays. God's promises often require patience. Waiting does not mean God has forgotten you. Third, faith depends on God's promises rather than circumstances. Abraham looked beyond what he could see and trusted what God had said. Fourth, faith grows through testing. Every challenge Abraham faced strengthened his trust in God. The same is true for us. Trials are often the training ground where faith becomes stronger. Fifth, faith ultimately points us to Christ. Abraham's story is not merely about Abraham. It is about God's faithfulness. It is about God's provision. It is about God's redemptive plan fulfilled through Jesus. Abraham's legacy, thousands of years later, Abraham's influence continues. His story inspires believers around the world. His faith encourages us to trust God's promises. His obedience challenges us to follow God's leading. His perseverance reminds us never to give up. But perhaps the greatest part of Abraham's legacy is this: the same God who guided Abraham still guides his people today. The same God who kept his promises to Abraham still keeps his promises today. The same God who strengthened Abraham's faith can strengthen yours. Whatever challenge you're facing today, remember Abraham. When the future seems uncertain, trust God. When the promise seems delayed, trust God. When the path is unclear, trust God. When the test is difficult, trust God, because the God who called Abraham is still faithful. Final encouragement: Abraham's life teaches us that faith is not about having all the answers. Faith is about trusting the one who does. You may not know what tomorrow holds. You may not understand every detail of God's plan. You may be walking through a season of waiting, but you can trust God's character. You can trust His promises. You can trust His timing, and you can trust His love. Just as Abraham discovered, those who place their faith in God will never be disappointed.